Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for this webinar that's a part of the Housing That Connects Us webinar series. And the webinar is entitled Innovative Community Programs to Build Social Connection in Housing. My name's Laura Katawaki, and I'm a Research and Knowledge Mobilization Specialist with United Way BC. And I'm also the staff lead for our Provincial Seniors Housing Working Group. And we're really happy today to be able to co-host this webinar alongside the Hey Neighbour Collective. Before we begin the webinar, I wanted to start off with a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge the homelands of the Indigenous peoples of this place we now call Canada, and honor the many territorial keepers of the lands on which we work. And today we're presenting from the ancestral and stolen homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. We feel indebted to them for caring for this land. And we'd encourage you, if you know the territories that you're residing on, to put that in the chat and do a land acknowledgement there. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. So during the webinar presentations, everyone will be muted, but feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like. So for example, you can say your name, your pronouns, I use she and her, your organization or the territories you're calling from. Feel free to put in whatever you feel comfortable sharing. If you'd like to use closed captioning, there is a feature in the Zoom toolbar that says CC, and that provides automatic closed captioning, so feel free to turn that on if you'd like. There is going to be a question period at the end, but feel free throughout the presentations to put comments in the Q&A box or questions, and we can try and get to those during the question period. And the webinar is going to be recorded, and we'll be posting it online and also sharing out the slides. And we'll send out an email to all the participants afterwards to share out the recording and the PowerPoint presentation. So you'll be able to get that. Now, as I mentioned, this is a part of a larger webinar series on Housing That Connects Us. And so we're very happy to have this opportunity to work alongside the Hey Neighbour Collective in order to bring about a three-part series on building. And so this webinar today focuses on innovative community programs to build social connection in housing. And then on April 14th, there's going to be another webinar that Hey Neighbour Collective will be hosting on their platform, the benefits of being an enabling host. And that'll bring the conversation a bit more to the housing operators' side to hear their perspectives. And then there's going to be a third webinar on age-friendly sociable design. So we'd encourage you to attend the full series. And at the end of the webinar, we'll share more information about the second webinar in the series. Now, I just wanted to briefly talk about social connection. So this is something that the Seniors Housing Working Group, as well as the Hey Neighbour Collective, and many people within government, policy, healthcare, and other sectors really have begun to recognize is essential for people's health and well-being. And here you see a slide that's actually from the World Health Organization's Commission on Social Connection, and they released their landmark report in 2025. Now, I just wanted to share a few of the highlights from this report. So in the report, they noted that social disconnection, so feeling lonely or socially isolated, is widespread. And they found that it was prevalent in every region globally and also amongst all different age groups. They also highlighted the many negative effects that social disconnection can have on our health, including the fact that loneliness accounts for approximately 871,000 deaths annually. They also found in the report that across the globe, about 72% of people do report that they feel very connected or fairly connected. So of course, that's very good. But then on the other hand, that means that almost a third of people don't feel socially connected. And that's something that I think increasingly people are becoming aware of, and we're looking for different interventions and solutions to address this. And today we're going to be discussing how housing actually can provide a location and an opportunity to build social connection and to help address the social disconnection crisis. So today in our webinar, the agenda is that we're going to start off hearing a little bit from the Hey Neighbour Collective, and they're going to also talk about the importance of social connection in housing. And then we're going to hear about 3 different community programs that are working locally in order to help build social connection in housing. So we'll hear from Claudine Matlo from West End Seniors Network, Jenny Konkin from Whole Way House, and Stacy Barter from Building Resilient Communities. Then we're going to have a panel discussion with the presenters and also time for some audience Q&A, and then we'll wrap up the webinar around 11:30. So it's my great pleasure now to introduce Stacy Barter, who is going to be providing some context about the work of the Hey Neighbour Collective. So Stacy wears 2 hats for this webinar. She's the Executive Director for Building Resilient Neighbourhoods, and she's also the Director of Learning and Evaluation for the Hey Neighbour Collective. For over 25 years, Stacy has worked in sustainable community development with a wide range of communities, nonprofit organizations, and public sector agencies in both Canada and Latin America. Her recent work focuses on building neighborhood-based engagement, public engagement on climate change and health, community resilience, and collective impact across sectors. Stacy holds an MED from Simon Fraser University and is specializing in adult education, community development, and organizational learning. And so first she's going to be talking under her Hey Neighbour Collective hat and provide some context for the rest of the presentations in the webinar. So I will hand it over now to Stacy.
Great, thanks, Laura. Thanks so much. It's great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity and really nice to see the names in the chat. Lots of familiar names and also some folks that I don't know. So welcome and looking forward to the conversation today, and just thrilled to be co-presenting with Claudine and Jenny as well. So as Laura said, I wanted to just start us off by setting the context a little bit to share a little bit about the Hey Neighbour Collective and why we think connecting housing and social well-being and resilience is so important. And I'm just going to make sure that I can advance the slides. There we go. Yeah. So I don't know. I think lots of you probably are familiar with Hey Neighbour Collective, but for those of you who are not, Hey Neighbour Collective is that. It's a collective. So it's a group of many, many different organizations across BC and different sectors who've come together over the past, I think, 6 years now, or maybe we're pushing it, around this question of how can we work together to foster more multi-unit housing communities that are socially connected, age-friendly, neighborly, health-promoting, and resilient. And it's really exciting because there are so many sectors who've come together around this. So the collective as a whole is made up of researchers, the health sector, the nonprofit sector, of course, the housing sector, and residents themselves of multi-unit housing. And so we came together, we started in 2019, but really coming out of a pilot that started even earlier than that with the City of Vancouver. So the City of Vancouver's Healthy City strategy had identified social connectedness as a really key priority for all the reasons Laura just framed up. And so they had identified this as a priority. And at the same time, you know, this was around the time that people were really waking up to the levels of loneliness and social isolation in Canada and really the health impacts of that. So, you know, the classic thing we hear is that chronic loneliness and social isolation can be as damaging to health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. People were starting to understand the connection between being socially connected as a protective mechanism for all kinds of health reasons. And at the same time as sort of understanding that, we also were hearing in Metro Vancouver from some earlier work done by Vancouver Foundation about how this really was significant in multi-unit housing. So some early research that they did with a survey across Metro Vancouver was showing that in some multi-unit housing contexts, the levels to which neighbors knew each other, trusted each other, and their feeling of connection or disconnection this was looking different in higher density environments. So generally speaking, those that were surveyed, they were finding that people had lower levels of connection in higher density environments. Now, we've learned a lot over the past several years, and we know that high density living doesn't necessarily mean that people aren't connected. In fact, some of the most thriving communities I know of are high rises or apartment buildings, but there are some unique challenges there in terms of the physical design and just the trends overall in our society, how people are more isolated, and this kind of idea of an emerging asocial society where we've sort of lost the muscle or the skills of neighboring. So when the city's pilot wrapped up, they did a pilot in 2 rental buildings in Vancouver, testing out a model of activating engagement through resident connectors in those buildings. We learned a lot through that, and when that pilot wrapped up, a number of us who were part of the advisory group for that pilot project, we felt that it was really important to continue this work. We were all working around the province around these issues, and so we formed the collective. And really, the idea was to really focus in on this idea of collective impact, that by working together, could we actually start to move the needle on levels of social connectedness and resilience in multi-unit housing? Could we actually transform the ways that multi-unit buildings are engaged and managed and designed? And ultimately, could we actually start shifting the attitudes and beliefs around higher density living? Because we think that's the way we're going, and it can be sociable and it can be connected. So we created a theory of change, and these pillars of our theory of change about what we think supports the shift to more social connection and resilience in multi-unit housing are laid out here. And the first 2, I think, are really critical for today's discussion. Having engaged, safe, and empowered residents, so how can programming support that, as well as proactive landlords and housing operators that are really being those enabling hosts that Laura talked about. And then we also always are working within Hey Neighbour Collective on the built form. So how can the design of housing support this? And how do we ensure there's supportive policy for all of this work? Now, all of this is happening in the context, I don't need to tell any of you, of an affordable housing crisis in Canada. And I think what I want to underpin, and has become so clear in this work, is that affordable, secure, stable housing is the key for social connection, actually. So we can't ignore the housing crisis itself and the need for secure and stable housing. It allows people to be connected longer term to their communities and the people right next door. And so this is absolutely critical. When we first started this work, Michelle Hoare, my co-director, is here, and we like to tell the story of how people sort of treated it as like, oh, isn't that nice? Social connectedness in housing, nice to have, but not so essential. And then, of course, COVID hit. And that was, I think, a really big wake-up call for many of us about how many people were isolated. It really exacerbated that, but also how important it was to have those connections really close to home for mutual support and the care. If you couldn't get out of your apartment, do you have people you could rely on to support getting groceries and things like that? And then, of course, in 2021, with the heat dome event in BC, this, I think, was another big shift in how we understood the importance of social networks and social connectedness. We had 619 deaths in BC, many of them older adults, many of them living alone. And probably a lot of those deaths would have been preventable. And certainly, I like to believe that if we knew our neighbors, knew who to check in on, some of those would have been prevented. So this is a slide from our symposium that some of you were at last year, where we were reflecting on, how has our own understanding of the importance of social connectedness changed and evolved. Certainly we know it's important for the loneliness epidemic and all of the health issues that Laura started out telling us about, but also we're starting to understand it actually saves lives, and it really is critical for resilience, especially with the new challenges we're facing around climate change, an aging population, and health challenges that many of us experience. Again, from our symposium, I think in this day and age, I think we're all feeling this idea of a polycrisis, this intersecting crises of climate and health, affordability, so many other things now. And so I think what we're really motivated around at Hey Neighbour Collective is this idea of multi-solving, that when there's so many different crises going on, we need to look for those levers that have multiple wins. And our belief is that fostering neighborly social connection and multi-unit housing is really like a cross-cutting solution. We can be solving for so many issues at once. So the programs that we're going to be sharing about today, I think you'll see they touch on many different dimensions, and solve for many problems. So, Hey Neighbor Collective has these three pillars of our work, our demonstration programs. You're going to hear about three today. As I mentioned, we also are always doing work around policy and systems change and sociable design with our partners at Happy Cities. Today, we're really honing in on the demonstration programs. And again, this is from our partners at Happy Cities. They put together this great spectrum of neighborly interactions and really helping us to understand there's a continuum from, lightly knowing your neighbors, starting to have spontaneous encounters, to actually getting to a place of having mutual caring support. And building design is, of course, the foundation. We need to have buildings that promote being sociable and being able to know our neighbors. But it's actually often not enough. We're in a society where as I said, we've kind of lost that muscle to know how to neighbor well. And so programs like Jenny's and Claudine's are so critical in kind of relearning how to be good neighbors. That's what we'll be talking about today. How do we ensure there's good building design, but on top of that, what are the interventions that can support really deepening this kind of sense of community care? And I'll just share a few more thoughts before I pass it over. We did an evaluation of our demonstration programs at the end of our first 5 years of work with the collective. So we evaluated looking across 7 different demonstration programs, some led by housing operators, some led by community-based organizations. And what came out of that was, quite a range of results because the programs were all different. But the key takeaway was this kind of programming works and it's making a difference. So across you see the range here again, depending on the context, they're very varied contexts, but the residents from participating in this type of programming were saying, yes, we're getting more connected, we're making new connections, increasing our sense of belonging, increasing our sense of being able to support each other as neighbors, and often an increased sense of safety. Sometimes learning to be better leaders or neighbors ourselves, and then quite often seeing that people also were benefiting from gaining access to other community services and supports. So I'm sure you'll hear examples of this in the case studies today. But what we also learned was that partnerships are so key to this work. And in particular, the role of community-based organizations is so key. So the magic that we found was when housing operators and community-based organizations were partnering to look at how to do community building in their buildings. And so I just want to underscore how critical we found the role of these community organizations is. They bring this community development expertise, connection to other local resources. And I left this in this slide on purpose because the other finding was, and we know that community-based organizations are often really under-resourced. So they have this really critical role to play, but it is a challenge. Our systems are not set up to resource this work well. And finally, just a couple of other takeaways from our evaluation. There are all those impacts for residents, but we also found looking across these programs, there also were great benefits for the community-based organizations themselves, wanting to connect with more isolated residents in their communities, getting into buildings rather than asking people to come out of buildings makes a huge difference, and they're able to better leverage resources. And also housing operators themselves, which I'm sure in our next webinar we'll hear a lot more about, but housing operators themselves were also saying huge benefits for them when social programming comes into the buildings. So everything from their own improved relationships with tenants to better marketing advantage, but also more stable tenancies, especially in kind of more challenging contexts, which I'm sure Jenny will talk about. So I think that I will leave it there with this one final thought that our other learning was there really is no cookie cutter approach to social programming in multi-unit housing. The contexts are so different. I think Claudine and Jenny and I will each be sharing about very different contexts today. The resident demographics and socioeconomic status is different in different housing communities. There's such a huge range of how the housing continuum that we're working in, everything from social housing to market housing or owner-occupied housing. And so the level of resident capacity to engage, the kind of starting level of connection is quite different. And so different models are needed, and that's why I'm excited. We'll get to hear about a few different ones today. I will leave it there. And I think, Laura, are you passing the baton or am I?
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you very much, Stacy, for providing that context, which I think is really going to help to ground the next three presentations we hear about the specific community program examples. So our next presenter is going to be Claudine Matlo, who is the Executive Director of West End Seniors Network, and she'll be talking about the Oasis program. Claudine has over 15 years of experience working with older adult populations in neighborhood houses and other senior serving organizations. She holds a Master's of Gerontology and a Bachelor of Arts in Women's Studies and Psychology from Simon Fraser University. And previously, she held the role of Director of Family and Senior Services at Mount Pleasant Neighborhood House. She brings proven experience working with public funders in fiscal management and human resources, and also in community engagement. And we're really excited today to be able to have her here to talk about the Oasis program.
Thank you, Laura, and hello, everybody. I will do my best to run through the slides, and of course, I know they'll be shared with you afterwards, so you can take some time to look at them. First time for me presenting in this format, so I can't see any of you except for our presenters here, so a little odd, I have to admit, but let's go through it and yeah, share what I can. So thank you for the introduction, Laura, and also thank you, Stacy, excuse me, for setting the ground and the frame for us and the context for all of the work that we do together. For those of you that don't know us, West End Seniors Network is actually, yes, located in the West End of Vancouver. And what makes it a bit of a unique community is that the majority of the housing in this community is multi-unit dwelling, high-rise, low-rise units with a very dense and very high older adult population. What also makes it unique is that among that older adult population, we have a very high number of low-income seniors who are also living alone. So that's the context of the community that we primarily work in, our mission and vision. And I'm going to speak to you, as Laura mentioned, about the Oasis model. And we're very grateful to be a part of the Oasis model. It began for us in 2024, which you will see, in a partnership with Queen's University. So the Oasis model, a little bit of a context for those of you that this is new for, is an initiative that offers programming for older adults living within a naturally occurring retirement community. So about half the buildings we work in are only seniors, and then others are a mix of seniors and older adults. Oasis is unique as it seeks to empower older adults to identify their needs and determine the services and activities which best meet those needs. Oasis includes programming developed by the members, designed to foster movement, healthy nutrition, socialization to support older adults to age with their communities. So there's three pillars to the Oasis program, which includes nutrition, physical activity, and social engagement. So I'm going to run through three of the buildings that we've been working with over the past couple of years. This is just a summary of the sites that we work with. So the New Continental building was the first one that we began with in June 2024. It's a senior-specific building, independent living, 120 units. Some people are receiving in-home care, of which we do not provide. They bring it in or it is provided by public health. And the individuals in that building have a really vast mix of physical abilities. Rodan Lodge, we began shortly thereafter in August 2024, and it's an 11-story, 213-unit building located in the downtown east side. And more than 2/3 of the units, pardon that spelling error, are at the provincial shelter rate. It has a very complex population, some substance use, some mental health, and a variety of ages. So this one is not all older adult. And then Nicholson Towers is our newest building, which began in October 2025. And it's home to 240 low to moderate income, mostly seniors. So again, not all seniors. And again, varying degrees of substance use. It's with the Bloom Group, and the Bloom Group is currently working to return the building to a seniors only building. And that building also has a real variety of people with substance, physical abilities, and other challenges, I'll say. And the picture on the side here, I just wanted to comment why I added it, because this is really what often happens is it can look like complete chaos, but it's intentional chaos, and people have opportunities to come together and have fun and just express themselves. And this is the inside of the Rodan Lodge building. Rodan Lodge. So as I mentioned, it's located in the heart of East Vancouver and one of the more complicated neighborhoods in Vancouver. It's home to those 55 years and older, often those with a disability, and it has 213 units. There is a community center located underneath, but again, that comes with its own complications, being that it is in the downtown east side. It's actually not a safe space for a lot of seniors to enter. The Rodan Lodge, though, does have an incredible common space with a kitchen. And that kitchen space, as you can see in the photos, is become the key gathering place for people in that building. And often it's the building people that cook there. You'll see one of the fellows on the left-hand photo who cooks all the time for people and is an absolute gem to the programs there. So there's also community gardens in the building and a barbecue. And I lift all of these things because it's because of those things that are already built into that space that we are actually able to host and gather and do the work that we do. So going forward, it's really important that spaces are designed with common spaces for people to gather, places to cook together, because as you'll hear from, I'm sure, Jenny as well and other presenters and see in the other remaining slides, food is so central to actually bringing people together, regardless of their socioeconomic status. So a few quotes. We did a project about a year ago at Rodan Lodge. It was around finding home, because we were finding that there was a lot of different feelings and expectations and needs about what Oasis could provide, and also wanted to bring some clarity to who we were as the West End Seniors Network providing Oasis, and what the City of Vancouver, who are the owners and operators of that building, could provide. So through that process, these were some of the things that we learned that were really challenging for people, and because of the safety concerns in the environment. So one of the tenants, you withdraw, begin to distrust others and become isolated. As Stacy highlighted, we know that what that can lead to. Being terrified to enter and exit through the front door means I do not accept invitations or go to cultural gatherings after 5 p.m. And it made me really sad to hear these things. And fortunately, at that time and now, we worked really well with the City of Vancouver, who are, as I mentioned, the owners and operators of that building. They heard the concerns and they responded to the concerns by setting up security at the front entrance to the door to make it safer for people to be able to enter and leave their home. So it's just a small example of how those relationships can actually lead to good change. I've done this slide only for Rodan Lodge as an example. These are some of the questions Laura will be speaking to later. So some of the challenges in the building: trust, as I've mentioned, the tenants, residents lacking trust of the building managers and owners, safety concerns, expectations of what Oasis can and cannot do, and challenges: culture, substance, physical ability, and how do you program in a building for all these different needs and address those needs for a variety of people. On the other hand, successes start with the familiar, and you'll hear this throughout the slides again. The coordinators have again and again emphasized how important it is to start with what's familiar with the tenants and what they want, be that food, bingo, whatever it is, start there. Keep it simple and consistent, monthly planning sessions with the tenants, engage and involve. Food, as I mentioned, planning, cooking when possible, and eating together. Volunteer roles. So the design for us with the Oasis program is both having a paid coordinator as part of the program, while engaging tenants to become volunteers and take ownership of the programs. But what we've learned is there needs to be a real balance between these two things, because for it to be only volunteer driven within the context of the buildings that we are in, there's too much pressure on those volunteers and a lot of challenges that can arise, that somebody who's paid needs to be there to support the volunteer and take on those challenges that a volunteer should not be responsible for dealing with. In the buildings we are in, there's a need, as I mentioned, staff person to be in charge. Tenant and volunteer can lead the programs, and it does build trust with the tenants. And I will say most of the time, because it would relate back to challenges. Sometimes there's an individual in the buildings who's very dynamic and is not as well received by all the tenants. And if they are the only one running the programs, other individuals in the building do not feel as welcome. So it's always this balance of running programs with people who do have capacity and supporting them to engage other people in the building and creating those welcoming spaces. And then scaling. For somewhere like Rodin Lodge, it's partnerships, trying to have more partnerships with the building, the people, the community as much as possible, bringing in more in-kind partnerships to support the finances of the program, food security, food rescue programs, looking towards and building co-funded models. And when I say that, I mean it's the building that needs to step up and be part of funding these models, not just on the community organizations. And obviously more engaging the tenants in the funding of Oasis and what that could potentially look like. Some quotes that I've added from some on the slides from our two fabulous coordinators. The challenges are various, as Rodin Lodge is in the downtown east side, and we have a very active block with the drop-in center being on the ground floor, and we are truly an oasis here. So it is a space where people feel that they can just enjoy themselves and relax. And this is Guy that shared this quote with us. So New Continental, just trying to keep an eye on time, and hopefully I'm not going too fast. The seniors building, as I mentioned, located in the downtown south community. Seniors independent living, 110 seniors. This is the seniors only building of the two that we run. Feelings of mistrust of people coming into the building from outside. This was what we were dealing with when we began in the building. The space used to be open to the community, and things happen that weren't positive for the tenants. So they're very hesitant to have people come in from the outside. And as I mentioned, large variety of mobility among the tenants. This building, although it's being renovated at the moment, has a rooftop garden that was being worked on last year. And the beds were designed to be accessible for lots of the tenants there. And the picture on the bottom there is an example of how us as Western Seniors Network have this really great opportunity to partner with buildings and bring what we do here at somewhere like Barclay Manor out and into the buildings. This is our Barclay Bards group. They are an incredible, feisty group of musicians. At any given time, there's 20 to 30 of them. They practice here at Barclay Manor, and now they're going out into the community and doing performances. So they came to the New Continental to do, this is one of their performances, and they've actually gone back several times and done lots of great performances there. So a good partnership opportunity. For the New Continental, some of the challenges that we had faced going in there was respect and trust, and you'll hear that again and again. Building that is the place to start, and building it with the tenants. So these are two small examples of how we listened to what the issues were for the tenants and then tried to develop respect policies and engagement work from what they had told us. So the co-creation is super key. And then having these displayed in common spaces so that tenants can see their input reflected back. And from our Oasis coordinator over at Nicholson Towers, which I'll speak to next, sometimes conflicting perspectives among residents can create tension. We address this by reminding them of the respect policy when it is needed through one-on-one conversation and encouraging open dialogue while keeping interactions focused on shared goals. And then Nicholson Towers, the most recent site, started in October 2026. This particular site is just down the road from Barclay Manor, which is one of our, as I mentioned, our main site. It's in the West End, 20-story high building, 240 low to moderate income folks. The Bloom Group owns and operates and is committed to making Nicholson Towers a below market affordable housing building. Residents must be able to live independently and be committed to the community aspects of the building, which includes shared amenity space. You can say they need to be committed to that, but how it's actualized and how it plays out is often different. They've been through a lot in that building. There was a large fire. It's being repaired, and they're working towards reinvigorating, we will say, the common spaces. And there's a bit of a longer quote here, so I'll let you read that at your leisure. But as we mentioned, food, and the two coordinators over there, that's what they've discovered is the cooking. There's a great little kitchen. They spent a lot of work to clean it up and make it usable. Doing this with the tenants was really important. And now they've spent a lot of time making homemade soups with the tenants there. And the bottom picture, you'll see the bingo machine. For the first couple months, that is all they wanted to do was bingo, 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 bingo. And so that's what they did. And it's through that that people started coming out, that and the food, because they felt heard that that was what they wanted. So that's what we're going to do. And then this is just a bit about learning together. The power of invitation, some of the things that we've learned from our buildings, food, as I've mentioned, consistency through scheduling. Start with what is familiar. Know your people, build trust, build community. Again, consistency, showing up for your people. And sometimes that's just being present and having coffee going. The process of discovery to bring people together, and partnerships. Everyone is your partner. The building manager, the tenants are your partner. Look at every person as part of that partnership. And another quote for you, just letting them see that we are not leaving and we are here to give folks a place to talk, think positively about their lives, has made a huge difference here. And that was from one of our coordinators for Noosh. Oh, sorry. That's all.
All right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Claudine. I really appreciated that presentation. And it's amazing because I remember when Oasis was first getting started in BC, and to see how far it's come, it's really amazing. So thank you very much for that presentation. So we're going to move on to our next community program. And so we're going to hear now from Jenny Konkin, who is the president and co-founder of Holway House Society. It's a registered charity founded in the downtown east side of Vancouver, and she founded it while managing her grandparents' SROs, the Silver and Avalon hotels. Holway House Society now partners with nonprofit housing operators to provide on-site community building programs and tenant support services to vulnerable seniors, veterans, and residents who have experienced or are at risk of homelessness. Jenny has received a number of commendations and acknowledgements for the work that she's been doing, including a commendation from the Minister of Veteran Affairs of Canada in 2022. She serves as the president of the board of directors for Holway House Society and also the Veterans Memorial Housing Society. And we're very excited to have her here today to talk more about the work of Holway's House in Veterans Manor.
Thank you so much, Laura. I appreciate that. And thank you, Claudine. Great to hear more about the work that you're doing. So as Laura shared, I have the great privilege of being a part of Holway House. And at Holway House, we build healthy communities in housing. And I'll share a little bit about how we got started and how we started working with seniors to support them to age well in place. So as Laura just shared, we partner with nonprofit housing providers to do on-site community building programs and tenant support services that foster healthy, connected communities. The populations that we serve are low-income veterans, seniors, and people with disabilities. And our goal is to help them feel at home and well supported so that they're able to age well in place. We tailor our services to the needs of the tenants. We have staff on site ranging depending on the needs of the building, from 3 days per week to 7 days per week. And our goal is that if we can create safe and welcoming environments, we can empower at-risk seniors to not only maintain stable housing, but access vital healthcare services and community resources and thrive with dignity and belonging. And I'm so sorry if you can hear my little dog snoring, but I don't have the heart to wake her up. She's so loud. We now we support over 800 residents. We operate at 8 different sites. 7 of those sites are for independent seniors, and 1 is a supportive housing site in the downtown east side. We partner with 6 different housing providers. I saw some of you on the webinar today. Nice to see you. We have 20 staff. We operate in 4 municipalities. So we're in the downtown east side and across Vancouver, as well as Burnaby, Langley, and downtown Victoria. And our average budget is $1.3 million. And I'm just going to share a little bit about our beginnings. The buildings that you see there in black and white are my grandparents' SROs that they purchased in the 1970s. So that's West Pender Street, downtown Vancouver, just a little bit outside of the downtown east side, but still kind of in that catchment. And I grew up around these buildings. My grandparents brought us there all the time. And so in 2010, when my brother and I took over management, we really thought we were going to come in and save the downtown east side. We were going to fix all of the problems. And we were very naive. We needed some humbling. And as we got to know our residents, we had 85 men in the building who had come out of homelessness, incarceration, who struggled with mental health and addiction issues. And I thought if we could just get everyone some food and some clothes, and I'll help them write a resume, we could help solve the homelessness crisis. And it was very apparent that there was so much of a deeper underlying issue of loneliness and isolation. In fact, it was a man who passed away in his unit that really opened my eyes to the issues that we were seeing. And from there, as we tried to find family or who do I call, and as I'm asking the other tenants, he had lived there for 6 years and not one person could tell me his name. He had lived in such deep isolation and loneliness from the trauma he had experienced. And as I got to know his sister, I learned his story. But it really was the catalyst for us starting Wholeway House. And I didn't know how to run a charity, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that even though I might not be able to fix the downtown east side, I could fix this. People didn't have to live completely alone and then die alone. And so we started very simply with, I'm Italian, but I will say I have not met a culture yet that does not gather together and eat together. And that's how we bond. And so I started partnering with community organizations, and we built a family dinner. It took a while for that culture to break of wanting to just take a plate and go and eat alone in their room. But as we built that became really our flagship program of how Wholeway House operates. And so that was really our reconnect. And I gotta use this button here. So as I'm just gonna, go to here. So we started our programs with this reconnect, and it was truly all about how do we provide opportunities for people to connect with each other, because I don't know anybody who feels comfortable just going and knocking on their neighbor's door and saying, hi, do you want to be my friend? And so we needed to create those places where people could do that. And as we did, we saw that they wanted more opportunities to connect. So through morning coffee programs and different programs like this, we also started to see that people had a sense of wanting to give back and contribute. They wanted a sense of purpose. Each of us has value that we can bring to the table. And so as we did that, we saw that we needed to create opportunities for them to be involved. And whether that was volunteering to help set the tables or wash the dishes or clean the floors or host an art session or teach something that they know about. That was how we started to create our rebuild programs. And then the recenter was really the third issue that we saw, which was they didn't have a stable one-on-one tenant support. Every resource that they went to, whether it was the clinic or the different community resources, they were always having to tell their story again or reintroduce themselves and see what was happening. And so we have a one-on-one tenant support program. Well, what happened was that our our building stabilized to the point that BC Housing took notice, the city took notice. We went from my first building inspection of 136 infractions down to 3 within 3 years. People took care of their homes. They were cooperative. They allowed us to do pest control. They were happy, or they were proud of their home. And this was an SRO that was built in 1906. We didn't get to change their housing environment necessarily. We created a safe space. We were really good operators in that way, but we saw that there was the community aspect, that they had this sense of home and belonging. And so from there, BC Housing took notice that our housing stabilized, that people weren't going back into homelessness, that we had no violence. We had, compared to other SROs in the neighborhood, we had on average, now this is before the opioid crisis, but on average, 24 calls to 911 per year, whereas the other 4 neighboring SROs had over 200 to 250 calls to 911 per year. So we were seeing these changes. So we received some funding, and that's how we partnered with the Veterans Manor. And this opened my eyes to the issues that seniors were facing. So we began to tailor these programs to the needs of seniors and veterans who are low income, who are struggling with complex medical issues. Some of our buildings have addiction and mental health issues, and others are seniors who are just aging in place, who are living below the poverty line on a pension. And so as we develop the programs, we have a community committee. They get to join us in setting the calendar. So you can see, I'm just going to go over a couple of these programs, but each building has their own flavor, their own culture. And so we tailor it to what they would like to do. And that includes those family dinners, the games. We do puzzles at all of our buildings. We have some people who are more socially potentially they have social anxiety, so we have those programs available for them where they can still come and be in that community room, but maybe they're just doing a puzzle on their own so that they're not feeling isolated. And then, unfortunately, one of our most popular programs is our Ride to the Food Bank. We have many seniors who are needing food security, but it's still an opportunity to have an outing together, to go together, to do it with dignity, and to not be embarrassed about that. And then we bring in practical things like hearing tests and foot care and haircuts. We do exercise classes. And then on our one-on-one support, we do everything from visiting people in the hospital to, we also, as Oasis, we don't do any form of, we don't go into healthcare, but we advocate for healthcare and we coordinate healthcare. So a lot of my team's work is around, I think I have a second slide on that, around coordinating healthcare. So whether that's getting an OT to come in and do an assessment to go into higher care before we have an emergency or a crisis. We have medical appointment coordination, reminders, and then also coordinating hospital discharge, which I know so many of us are struggling with. And so ensuring that they have the support that they need when they come home. We also provide tax clinics and helping with the landlord for rent repayment programs, but we really are neutral when it comes to landlord and tenancy issues. We don't advocate for or against the landlord, so that allows us to be a truly trustworthy organization for the tenants, that we don't have any power over their tenancy whatsoever. We also support with clean unit coordination as well. And I'm just going to share very quickly. So during COVID, we had a meal delivery program to help people isolate safely. We also, as you mentioned, with the heat domes, we set up chill zones in the amenity spaces. So we have air conditioning, we have hydration stations, all those types of things. And the newest emergency that we are facing in most of our buildings is elevator breakdowns. So when an elevator breaks down and people are stuck on the 12th floor, we're able to get them groceries, make sure their medications are being delivered, doing visits and friendly visits and check-ins, making sure that they have what they need. When an elevator is out for 37 days, we need to be there for people to support them in that time. The results, we see obviously a natural community of support. The ripple effect of that is incredible. Not only do I, from a simple morning coffee program, now I have a reason to get up and take a shower and comb my hair and get ready and get out the door, because now I have a routine, but I'm also making connections with my neighbors. And so we often have a senior come and tell a staff member, with that, I didn't see Mr. So-and-so yesterday at the morning coffee program. I'm going to go check on him, or someone is sick. I went grocery shopping for them. So now we see a natural community happening where they support each other. And that's really beautiful to see that. We also are able to do early intervention. So we have less crisis, also less eviction. We spend less days in hospital. I cannot tell you the number of doctors and nurses who have shared with my team, if you weren't here, we would not have been able to discharge them. We don't know what they're going home to. So we're able to get people out of hospital sooner. Hoarding, all these types of things that we're able to intervene. And I'm at my time, but I just wanted to share. This is Martin. We were able to help him ensure he was able to get home support. Home support couldn't enter his unit because of hoarding. We brought him in out of a shelter. He was 86 years old and struggling with dementia. And then this is my friend Lorraine, and I'm just going to tell you, we did a study with SFU after 14 years, and I didn't know this. She shared this with the Vancouver Sun, who was interviewing her. She shared that after 14 years, uh, with her doctor's coordination, she went off of her antidepressant medication, and we had only been in the building for 6 months. And she just shared that it's changed her life and everything is better. So that's an amazing ripple effect that we get to see, that people's health increases when they have that sense of healthy community. And I'll stop there, Laura, because I don't want to go over my time. I'm sorry. But very similar to what you were sharing, Stacy, we see those same results where people feel healthier, happier, safer, more connected. So that's that. And I will leave that there. I'm just going to say this is the most cost-effective way to take care of people. We know, I think, in our sector, what we see in healthcare, hospitalization, assisted living, but homelessness as well. And what a dignified way to be able to age well in place, have community, and thrive in our older years. And I would wish that for every one of us as well. I'll leave it there, Laura.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jenny. It's always really inspiring to hear when you talk about the work of Whole Way House. Everyone can feel your passion for it, and you've got an amazing program.
Thank you.
So next, we're going to hear from Stacy again. And so Stacy's going to be talking now more from her Building Resilient Neighborhoods hat, and she's going to be talking about some of their programs.
Thanks, Laura. And Claudine and Jenny, it's always so heartening to hear about both of your work. It's amazing. It's really incredible. So as Laura said, I'm sort of switching hats here. So in addition to my role supporting the collective of Hey Neighbor Collective, I'm also part of one of the core partners of the collective called Building Resilient Neighborhoods. So we're a small nonprofit. We're based in Victoria, and we've been working since about 2012, looking at ways to build community resilience in urban neighborhoods. And really the kind of core of our work is very aligned with Hey Neighbor Collective. It's this idea that resilient communities start with connected, prepared, and caring neighbors. So that's really where we hone in. It's how do we build up these systems of mutual support in this social infrastructure. I'm going to share a little bit about our Connect and Prepare program that we've been working on for several years now. And before I do, I just want to reflect back again what I shared at the end of my kind of first presentation, which is there's so many different contexts. So the need for different types of approaches and programs in different contexts across the housing continuum, different demographics of residents. So Connect and Prepare is a bit of a different model where Oasis and Whole Way House are in the building, really having that staff presence accompanying the residents. Connect and Prepare is a lighter touch intervention where we're really trying to activate residents to take leadership themselves, give them a little bit of support, and then we step out. Sometimes accompanied by staff in the housing setting as well. But our focus, as I said, is really this like neighbor to neighbor resilience. If we can strengthen those connections, does it make a difference in these three pillars of connect, prepare, and care? We've had 3 different programs we've run out over the years, but really these pillars of connect, prepare, and care are kind of the cornerstone of everything we do. And I wanted to share today about Connect and Prepare because I think it's really speaking to a lot of people, particularly for the reasons we shared earlier, when we're seeing more and more climate events coming our way. People are feeling concerned about being prepared for emergencies, and we've found that it's this incredible way to get people connected is by preparing together. So we started the program in 2017 in collaboration with the City of Victoria's Emergency Management Division. I saw that Sarah Hunn, who's now with City of Vancouver, who used to be with City of Victoria, was on the call earlier. So shout out to Sarah, who was really key in building this program up from the ground up. And the program, as I said, is really about getting neighbors connected with each other through the gateway of getting prepared for emergencies. And through the process of building those connections, trying to actually shift the culture where we give people an excuse to help each other out, and that gets practiced, and then it can ripple out in other ways. And ultimately, that we believe makes us more resilient to all kinds of things that might come our way. This is me when I don't know how old I am here, maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 or something. And I grew up in a small rural community. This was me and my buddy. We went out picking buttercups and went and brought them over to our neighbor's house. And it was just that kind of community where it was no problem to knock on the door and say, hey, I got some buttercups for you. But I started with this because the community conditions in which I lived, and the sense of care for each other as a community is something I hear so many people yearn for. So I remember, I often tell the story, when I was in elementary school, one of my classmates' house burnt down. And of course, the whole community rallied together to house that community, to feed and clothe them and get them back on their feet. And so this is the essence of what we want, and that many people feel we've lost, is how do we, it's not that we need to be best friends. We're not best friends with our neighbors, but how do we take care of each other and have each other's back and look out for each other? I've already spoken about the heat dome, but that was really a wake-up call, I think, in BC in particular, around the reality that social infrastructure, social connections are so key for preparedness. We can have all of the supplies, but often it's the people that make the difference. This is another slide from the Chicago heat wave, where there were 2 neighborhoods side by side, and the number of deaths in the community that was less socially connected, there were 10 times more deaths. So we're just seeing in research and evidence time and time again that this is real. These social connections actually protect us when things get tough. And it's not just the big events, it's the everyday events. This is Anne, a colleague of mine in Victoria. Anne's neighbors puts newspapers out on each floor every morning, and noticed one day Anne didn't take the newspaper in, and of course discovered that Anne had fallen and was able to support her. So knowing each other, it's the everyday things and it's the big things that it makes a difference for. This is my colleague's mother, Nicola. She knew her neighbor Tegan, who got the call that probably many of us have gotten before, where daycare was closed down due to illness, and Nicola was able to step in and help Tegan with childcare. So again, all the small ways and big ways we can help each other as neighbors. This is really what we're trying to foster through Connect and Prepare. And as I said earlier, this is an article from a researcher in the States who researched the Japan 2011 tsunami and earthquake. And I love the title, Social Ties, Not Just Sandbags, because again, it's just research over and over again is showing it's important to have the bottled water. It's important to have the emergency kits, but actually what makes the difference is knowing each other's neighbors. In the earthquake, knowing who needed to be digging our neighbors out sometimes, literally, as the stories we've heard. So our tagline for the program is, it's who's in your kit, not just what's in your kit. And how do we come together to sort of build up these muscles that will be there when we need them in all kinds of ways. So the program, how it works, it's quite different from the previous 2 models, and it's nice, I think, today to have some diversity of models to show how that this work can happen in so many different ways. So in our situation, it's really groups of neighbors. We work with groups of neighbors in their building for a series of workshops. And sometimes that's in partnership with housing operators who want to bring the program into the housing. Quite often it's actually residents themselves reaching out and saying, we're concerned about emergency preparedness, or they found out about this opportunity, or they want to get more connected with their neighbors. And then there's a process of ensuring the housing operator is on board to support the process. Really, it's about neighbors taking action together and doing something together, and through that, building relationships. So the process, this is sort of the arc of the process. They come together, learn about why is it actually helpful to do this together rather than on our own, getting prepared for emergencies? What are our particular strengths and vulnerabilities as a community? Offering some inspiration about projects they might do together or small actions they might do together as neighbors to get more connected and prepared, and then doing projects together. So some of the examples we've seen come out of Connect and Prepare groups are things like neighbors starting to do skill shares, realizing, the conversation about emergencies, we start realizing, oh, in the event of an emergency, I could be a translator. Oh, I could provide emotional support, or people might have specific technical skills they could offer. So skills sharing, buddy systems. Sometimes the conversation about emergency food leads to opportunities to look at food security more generally. So quite diverse projects that neighbors identify that they want to do together to strengthen those connections and be more prepared. And the essence of the program is really founded on this model of asset-based community development. So the idea that it's not delivering a program to people, but really doing it with them, leveraging people's gifts and strengths and contributions. Both Jenny and Claudine spoke about how critical that is for people to have a sense of agency and hope and purpose, and so that they can actually take leadership or contribute and with some support to building community. And I have just a couple stories and examples to share. This one was from our very first pilot in Victoria. LeBlond Place was a partnership with Capital Regional Housing. It's a low rise for seniors with disabilities. And they first partnered with us with our Resilient Streets program, which was just about trying to incentivize neighbors getting connected. And these two amazing champions said, they wanted to get to know their neighbors more. They started doing coffee meetups in their lobby. They got permission from the housing operator to do coffee meetups. And through those conversations, they learned many people in the building were struggling with their food security. So they ended up partnering. They accessed a small grant. They partnered with a local food organization to bring healthy food distribution into the building rather than people having to go out. And I think through that process just gained a sense of, this quote here is, together we focused on our abilities rather than our individual disabilities. This sense of, oh, we can do something. We were feeling a bit disempowered, but now we realize we can do some things. And through that, they gained confidence and then decided to work with us on Connect and Prepare. And through that process, they set up a buddy system to look out for each other. But they also decided, again, low-income building, they realized people didn't have basic emergency supplies, and they accessed a small grant to actually host a party where they went to the dollar store and they got all the supplies for grab and go kits and built these kits together so everyone in the building could have one. More recently, we've had an amazing partnership with BC Housing at several of their directly managed sites, where we're working with their staff, their tenant engagement staff, and others for them to be delivering and facilitating Connect and Prepare. One of the stories and examples I love is in one of the buildings where the residents chose to set up a floor connector system. So the floor connectors are residents who want to be a connector on their floor, helping people know who lives on the floor, getting a sense of who's there, and helping people understand just the basics of what to do in an emergency. In this particular building, they had a fire, and people were quite traumatized by it. There was one woman in a wheelchair who had been stuck on the second floor and no one came to help her. And so this act of taking ownership of being a connector and helping people understand what to do and how to help each other in an emergency was really powerful for them. Through working with them, they decided to, we co-created these door hangers that help people identify who's in the unit, totally voluntary, but language is spoken, mobility issues, just so neighbors could have a sense of, if they wanted to, they could let people know the kind of supports they might need, as well as a simple one-pager on what do we do in this building if there is an emergency. But the process of doing that together as residents was, I think, quite empowering. And what we heard was really gave people a sense of confidence. These are some of the champions in that building who also ultimately chose to do a grab and go bag party as well. And again, the stories we hear is like, it's great that people get the kits, but it's actually the act of giving them out and talking to people and doing the project themselves. And I just threw in a couple of other examples because, while many of the projects are emergency related, um, on the surface, these ones might not seem so, but what we've seen is that residents start identifying it's actually the connections that matter, and that is emergency preparedness. So this is a building where they didn't have common space, a family building. They realized they didn't know each other, so they got permission to start doing parking lot parties, where they set up things for kids to play and elders to be together. Another example of another building where their common room, first time we went in, there literally was a like half an inch of dust on the top of it because it just wasn't being used. So their project was they bought a set of dishes for their common room and started doing monthly potlucks so they could start to get to know each other as neighbors. So simple acts, but the Trojan horse of emergency preparedness really making a difference, I think. We've also seen, amazing results where people are getting more connected, but also starting to feel more confident and starting to share their skills and resources. And we hear stories anecdotally of like how that ripples out in other ways. So, as I said, I think our big takeaway is this idea that emergency preparedness can be this incredible gateway. And the thing we're so excited about now is I mentioned the partnership with BC Housing. That's one example, but through our collaboration with Hey Neighbour Collective, the past several years, we've really been focused on training other organizations to do this. We realize we can't be everywhere. So this is an example of the organizations we've been training and working with this year. You can see community organizations, local governments, health authorities, and several housing operators. So it's really exciting to see this approach scaling and spreading. And I think that is me. Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Stacy. I remember hearing about your programs at the Hey Neighbour Symposium, and that idea of emergency preparedness being a gateway was kind of like a new thought for me, which was really intriguing. And it's amazing to hear about the work that you've been doing and how the communities are coming together to make that a pathway for social connection. So now we're going to move on to a few questions for our panel. And I also want to make sure, of course, that we have some time for audience questions as well. So I'll pose a few questions to our presenters first, and then I'll go to some of the audience questions. So I'd be interested to know what's one or two key models for each of your programs that you really feel are working well and kind of a secret sauce or contributing to its success?
I can start.
Yeah, please.
And I think Claudine mentioned this a couple times as well. For us, in order to build trust, first of all, we are the tortoise and the hare. We start slowly, we go slowly. And every building we've been in, we have the naysayers and then we have the overexcited. They're like, let's do 15 programs this week. And we're like, let's do one. And so that's one thing, is just that consistency, like only starting programs we know that we can sustain. And the other is, I think, the health of our team. So ensuring that we are bringing in team members and continuing our healthy staff culture, where I believe like change happens through osmosis. And so if we're bringing in negativity and gossip and naysaying and the healthcare system and the government and all that, like all the gossip, like even when people are sitting watching the news, we're like, that's not our community building program. And so we really create very healthy spaces. And even if it means having kind of conversations around, we just want to create like a breath of fresh air, like a space that when you come into, it's like, oh, I actually feel refreshed, not the life is sucked out of me, which is often what happens in those community spaces. And we see so many amenity spaces shut down because I call it the footloose effect. Something negative would happen and then landlords just shut down those amenities. They're like, why are we keeping this open? It's just fighting and arguing. So I think that's part of the secret sauce, is that you're actually creating, you can put on a coffee program, but it becomes a negative gossip space in the morning and everyone's just talking about politics and government and it doesn't help anybody. So for us, that's a big key factor, that our team are bringing a space that actually creates a better environment. So
yeah, thank you so much for sharing that insight. And I think with the current climate, of course, with everything going on in the world, it is so easy to get bogged down with that negativity. And it's important to have that reminder about having those spaces being those welcoming and positive places people can come to. Claudine or Stacy?
Go ahead, Claudine.
I think we clicked at the same time. Um, Secret sauce. I don't think there's actually one secret sauce, and maybe that is the secret sauce, is that each building is so unique and that it's important to understand the people, the culture, the needs of the tenants in the building before acting and programming and deciding what's going to happen in that building. I think it's the process of listening and then pivoting and then listening again, and that consistency and patience as well. And I think one other thing for us that is working well is those relationships with the building managers, and that the tenants do see you as that united front. That they know that you're on the same page, that there's clarity of this is a building manager issue. This is something we can take care of, and that is continually emphasized for the tenants so that they can feel supported where support is needed and when support is needed. And that then that leaves us space to focus on the areas that we do well, and that leaves the building managers and owners space to do what they do well. Maybe it's that balance and communication that helps.
Yeah, thank you for that, Claudine. And I heard the word consistency again. So I think that's something really important that we want to highlight about having that consistency of the programs and the presence.
Yeah, I'm really resonating with both of the examples that you each shared. I mean, it is hard to drill down to one secret sauce. I think what came to mind for me is how much we need hope right now, and a sense of possibility and a sense of agency. And I think that is really the secret sauce of Connect and Prepare, is a sense of we can do things. We can do things, and actually sometimes we need accompaniment, depends on the environment we're in, right? All these different housing contexts, all these different populations. But for people to have a sense of we can take action and we can take care of each other, I think is huge, and makes a big difference.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that really resonated with people, the fact that we do need hope and a sense of positivity in these difficult times.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested to know because I think these are really amazing program models that each of you have. And I know that the people who are joining the webinars are probably coming from a wide variety of different types of settings in terms of different types of housing, but then also different communities and different target populations. And so I'd be interested to know how each of you could see your program being able to be translated to other contexts, whether that be another type of housing setting or to other different populations.
Oh, sorry, Jenny, did you want to go?
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that I mentioned at the end of my presentation that with Connect and Prepare, we've moved to this train the trainer model where we're working with other partners who are actually delivering the program. And so it's actually been an amazing opportunity to experiment and learn with delivering in really different contexts. So each partner, they may be in a different community. We're starting this year. I'm seeing some of the comments in the chat about rural communities. Some of our partners are in more rural or small communities this year, so we're going to be learning a lot through that. But also different partners working across the housing continuum. And so it has been very interesting and a lot of learning about what is core, what is sort of the core philosophy that has to be there, and then what can be adaptable in terms of how it's delivered. So, one of the examples that I gave is this sort of resident-led versus facilitator-accompanied process, because our model is really about residents taking action. In some contexts, they're ready to go. They can just go and they can self-organize, and they just need a little bit of incentive and support. And in other contexts, that accompaniment is really important. And so working with partners who understand their context and can adapt to their context has been really, really helpful and important. And then I've really appreciated partnering with place-based organizations who then often are connecting the residents with other resources as well. That's been a really positive thing.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting those opportunities to actually draw upon the expertise of the community.
Yeah.
Then Jenny or Claudine?
Yeah, I was going to say, so obviously we started in an SRO with adults who had experienced homelessness and struggle with addiction, mental health issues, and then moving to seniors with some of the same complications, and then moving to seniors who had never experienced homelessness or weren't at risk, and no addiction. And so what we learned is human connection is across all. It's a human need. And so yes, we adapt different things with different types of programs, but we stay under our three pillars. I think we need human connection in a healthy way. We need purpose and self-worth and value and opportunities to use our gifts and talents. And then we need very unique support that is for me as a unique person. And so that's that one-on-one support. So for us, that really translates. We're now looking at other communities that have asked us if we would work in, market housing. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, you don't have to be low income to need human connection. That's not I think it can be more prevalent in low income settings, but it's not unique to people who have lower incomes. So I think it's absolutely translatable.
Yeah, thank you for laying out those three common pillars, of course, that translate to all settings.
And I totally agree with Jenny on the different populations in the buildings. I know for the Oasis model in Ontario is one of the first places that come to mind. There's actually several buildings where Oasis is in buildings that are more affluent, better resourced. And what changes is the amount of staff support required in those buildings. So those buildings, it's the tenants that tend to take on more of the leadership role after that initial thrust. So that's one piece that varies, is how much staff time is required, needed either to give the lift to get it going or sustain it over a period of time. And then for our neighborhood, what is shifting as well is those buildings that don't have community spaces. And as we know, lots of buildings don't have that, which means that they can't, cook together or do these kinds of things. So we're working with Stacy and Michelle and the Hey Neighbor Collective to start looking at those neighborhood models and how can we build that community around the building and into other buildings that may have those spaces, or even other community spaces that might be available, a coffee shop, a underutilized community room, I don't know, in a business or something. So there's all kinds of spaces that it can be built in. But again, you need the staff time to give it the lift, to start to bring people together, to move it forward. So it can be applied in multiple spaces. It just varies on the amount of staff time needed, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you, Claudine. And I appreciate you highlighting the fact that the intensity of different programs can be kind of scaled up or down depending on the needs of the people that you're trying to serve. And I'd like to ask one more question, then I'll move on to some of the audience questions. But I just did want to ask because, of course, we know that there's so many great program models out there, like the ones we've just talked about today. And the challenge often is always sustainability in terms of being able to be financially sustainable. So what policies or resources or changes do you think we need to have in place in order to create more sustainable models so that we can make sure when there's amazing programs like these, they're going to be able to continue to operate on a regular basis? And I know that's a big question, so you might not have the solution.
I have the solution. No. I will just say I've been advocating with all levels of government for this since 2016. It's so nice to see so many people now in these webinars, because it's like we're together. And for so long, it felt like, does anybody know this is happening? And unfortunately, COVID brought, I think, this issue to light. But I think that one of the ways to look at the policy around this is around and Stacy, you did such a great job with those original slides in your first presentation about like this actually saves lives. Like this is a cost-effective but also natural human way to do life. And when we can start looking at prevention, and I hear this a lot from health and like actual healthcare providers totally believe in this model, and they're like, this is so amazing. This is what we need. It's that gap between housing and health. It's, all those things. But to look at having policy that talks about prevention and health as a whole, being at having validity, because right now, even Claudine and I were just speaking about this. How do I prove how many days you weren't in the hospital because you're healthier? How do I give you data on how many fall preventions we had or how many evictions we prevented. I can't prove it because it didn't happen because we prevented it. And so having a belief system and a society that says if we can all be healthier, we know that that will, for lack of a better term, this will be cheaper. Like life will be cheaper for our government too, unfortunately, is struggling right now with deficits. So and I think all of us as community members would prefer to just be healthier in general than have to constantly intervene in crisis, which is more expensive, which is more traumatic, which is more difficult to recover from if we get to recover from. And so I think if we can start giving validity to prevention models, that would be a huge thing that would change how funding is distributed. That's my soapbox.
I love that soapbox, Jenny, and I want to add to it and say, I mean, I'm kind of underscoring something I've said already, which is that, and I think it's so critical that the role of community-based organizations is recognized as part of that because A, there's an issue with recognizing the validity and the importance of prevention work, but B, the role that community-based organizations play in that. So it's not actually just about, you know, the health sector themselves struggle to have enough resources for prevention work. And how do we ensure that it's also flowing to these community-based organizations that have the skills, the expertise, the trusted networks and relationships like West End Seniors Network, you know?
All I can say is hell yeah. I agree with both of you wholeheartedly, and I've strongly feel that it needs to be seen as part of the continuum of wellness for people, not the healthcare continuum, but actually a continuum of wellness for people. And that's both the community serving organizations as well as the work that's currently going on in buildings like the work that Jenny is doing and the work that Hey Neighbour Collective is doing around those buildings. I think when we're looking at urban planning models and even planning models in general, that this becomes part of those considerations as we go forward.
Yeah, well, thank you. I know that was a difficult question, but you really all nailed it and hit it out of the park. And I really appreciate the attention that you're giving and the work to highlight the need to have that prevention mindset and to be able to convince people that prevention is what we need. We do have a few more minutes left, so I'm going to go to a few audience questions. We did have a question asking about how we can get these types of models into buildings that are private rental buildings and how you can work with landlords in order to convince them that these sorts of initiatives can be good for their tenants.
I'd be willing to take a first. Oh, sorry. Were you going to jump in, Jenny? I was just going to say I would take a first crack and then please add that there's actually a working group of Hey Neighbour Collective that's specifically focused on this very question right now about building out the business case for housing operators, particularly for market housing operators we're starting with, and really trying to pool and compile the evidence around the benefits. And we have lots of anecdotal evidence, and we're just wanting to really shore that up with other forms of evidence, and share that and disseminate that and engage more with the housing industry so that it just becomes, I think there's also a culture shift that needs to happen within a lot of the housing industry. We've run into challenges. I know I was looking at some of the questions and comments about sometimes housing operators can be gatekeepers and feel concerned about these kind of programs actually creating more problems for them if tenants start organizing or making demands or things like that. In reality, I think it's the opposite that happens. We see that it improves those relationships, but helping housing operators hear these stories and these examples with real evidence, I think is critical.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you, Stacy. I was sharing an example yesterday actually with Jenny about two buildings we have in our community. And the one building, as you mentioned, housing operator, very hands-off and doesn't get nervous about what's actually going to happen in the building if we bring these kinds of things in. And the other end of the spectrum where they're like, yes, please come in. So the welcoming part of it. But I think the partnership with the community organizations is what helps to mobilize and make these programs happen in multiple buildings. Yeah.
All right, great. And then another question that we had was about examples of building more inclusive connectedness among a diverse range of community members. So when we're thinking about buildings that might have multiple types of residents or other settings, or even just, I guess, engaging community outside of the building, do you have any examples of what can be effective there?
One of the things that we saw is, well, first of all of our programs are open to everyone. So we don't designate. I'll often get asked, like, do you do specific programming for Indigenous residents or for women or for, and we don't. We want everyone to be included always. And so that's one thing that for Holway House that we do, but also that all of our programs are able to be accessed by all physical abilities as well. And so we really work hard at that to find creative solutions when we do outings or different things like that. And then we also have two of our sites. I'll just talk about language and culture. So we have two of our sites that have more than 50% residents who are of Chinese descent. And so we hire staff who speak Cantonese and Mandarin, who understand the culture. And so we can bring cultural elements in. But I will say, especially in one of the buildings, when we got there, we actually had to do a lot of work to bridge the cultural divide. There had been a lot of issues in the past of like racism and full cultural divide. And so it took some time, but we really worked hard at having multiple community meetings and how do we do this together. And now, so for example, when we do games, there's a mahjong table and there's a bingo and there's a dominoes table and all the games are happening simultaneously. But it brings people together. And it is the number one feedback that we've heard in that building is like, we're so grateful that now there's not this division anymore, because it was like a palpable tension in that site, and so it's really good to see. But I think there are, as Claudine said, in each building you're learning about the culture of that building and what's happening. And I don't mean culture from your country, I mean culture from like that building and what's happening. So being able to work with it, but we had a site where we had families as well as seniors. And so how do we involve the seniors in the kids programming? Those types of things. I think you can get really creative to ensure that everyone feels included. There's not exclusive programming.
Yeah, we actually have one of the options or activities within Connect and Prepare is to actually help neighbors understand the diversity of their neighbors. And so doing some capacity building around considering who is in the building, what are the unique considerations, language, physical mobility, et cetera. And again, emergencies are like a great context to actually have those conversations, but encouraging people to think about that and think about how to be inclusive and strategize around that and supporting them to take responsibility for that. So it's not just on the facilitators of the program, but also the residents themselves.
And I think you've kind of now touched upon another question, which was in the Q&A box, which is about how do you successfully go into buildings where there might be challenges around the building culture? People perhaps have trauma, they don't trust each other, there might be racism or other challenges. So you've touched on that in both of your answers, but I'm wondering if there's anything else anybody would like to add for that.
The only thing I would just add is the more opportunities to be together, the more we all see each other as humans. I've gone from people who were violent towards each other in an SRO setting, to becoming like respectful of each other, like leaving threatening notes with a knife in each other's door, to literally like getting a haircut beside each other and being like, all right, he's not such a bad guy. So and then all the way to racism or to yeah, just like cultural tensions within us in a building. The more people see each other and interact with each other, the more we all have humanity for each other. That's just like it just happens. And so if we can keep creating opportunities that are positive, every positive interaction builds more and more trust and more compassion and more care. And so I think that's true of any type of, you know, circumstance where it like we see obviously with social media and those types of things are so polarizing because we don't see the human. And so once you see the human, I like if my neighbor upstairs is loud, I'm like, like they're doing it on purpose and they hate me and and then all of a sudden you have more interactions with them. You're like, oh, they're just like excited and they're walking loudly or whatever it is. But I think it creates humanity. So I think it's important. The more positive interactions you can create, and all three of these programs do that, just give people an opportunity to see that their neighbors are humans just like them and they struggle with problems and they have a story. Like every person has a story, and the more we can get to know them, the more compassion we have for each other.
Yeah, and what a great word of wisdom, I think, to end our panel discussion on, that fact that the more human interactions we can have, the more we can see people as other fellow human beings that we want to care for. So thank you very much for that word of wisdom. I'm going to move on now to closing the webinar, and I'd like to thank our amazing panelists for sharing their program models, which are doing such great work in our communities, and also sharing the insights and learnings that they've had. And I hope that this has been very inspiring for everyone who has joined the webinar. I know I definitely feel very inspired and hopeful from this conversation. So thank you all so much for your amazing work. I'd also like to thank our partner, Hey Neighbour Collective, for helping us to organize this webinar. And I'd like to finish by doing one last plug for our upcoming webinar, which will be the second in the series. So I'm just going to quickly put up again the slide so that you can see the information. So the next webinar will be on April 14th, and it's going to focus on the benefits of being an enabling host. And so we'll be able to hear more from the actual housing operators' perspective in terms of having programs like the ones we've talked about today operating in their buildings. This webinar will take place from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And my colleague Wingsy can put a link for the registration in the chat. And we'll also send out that follow-up email that I've mentioned, where we're going to be sharing probably today or on Monday, the recording, and then also the slides, as well as the link for the registration. So we'd encourage you to register. And I know there were a few questions that I didn't have time to get to that were for specific programs. So I will pass those on to the presenters, and we'll also provide in everyone's PowerPoint slides, they had their contact information. So I'm sure they'd be happy to follow up if people have questions about specific program models. And then the very last thing that I have to do is to say there is a very small evaluation survey that we do have that will pop up at the end of the Zoom. It'll only take 1 or 2 minutes of your time, and we would really appreciate it if you could give us some feedback on the webinar. And so I will close the webinar now. Thank you all for attending, and I really hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon and then also a wonderful weekend. Take care, everyone.